What's wrong with Ben, Doctor? When's he gonna play again?
He claims his back hurts, but his test results all came back clean. It appears he just doesn't feel like it.
Oh no! Is he ever gonna feel like it again?
It's impossible to know. It's in God's hands now.
Do you think the vaccine caused it?
I would think that, but only if I was
Doc, have you ever seen anything like this before?
As a matter of fact, your old buddy James Harden was here not too long ago claiming to have a hamstring injury, and he too had clean test results.
He's playing again? What'd you do for him?
Nothing. He just felt like it again out of nowhere. It was right after he got his way and got traded to Philly. So we just have to trade Ben to Philly and he'll feel like it again.
He just came from Philly.
Oh.
I'm just going to start this video by saying that I have tremendous empathy for Brooklyn Nets fans. But it's one of those situations where at least the Brooklyn Nets are in a situation that was kind of out of their control. I mean, if you rewound the season once again and they were faced with the same exact challenges and same decisions that they had to make, I'm pretty sure everyone, if they were put in given situation, would make the exact same decision. On top of that, we're giving away $500 to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. And now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? It's been a very interesting season for the Brooklyn Nets and for Ben Simmons. Starting with the Brooklyn Nets, a team that I predicted on the Laced Up podcast that was going to finish within the top 3 of the Eastern Conference. Ultimately, it doesn't even look like that because this team is just going to make it into the play-in. Now, unlike the Los Angeles Lakers, who was another team that I predicted making it to the NBA Finals to face off against the Brooklyn Nets, do you remember when that was a narrative? We thought Russell Westbrook was going to face off against Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving in the NBA Finals. Yeah, that seems like a distant memory now. Unfortunately, things just didn't go according to plan for both of these teams. I mean, of course, there was the Kyrie Irving vaccination drama where he didn't want to get vaccinated, and as a result of that, he had to sit out for half of the games. You had Kevin Durant in and out of lineups because of injuries. You had James Harden in and out of lineups as a result of a nagging hamstring injury. Eventually, what happened is James Harden got very frustrated with the way things were being run in Brooklyn. Whether it was the fact that Kyrie Irving wasn't available all the time or the fact that he wasn't being used primarily the way he was used in Houston, which no duh, you're playing with 2 other very good isolation scorers. Well, you were for at least 16 games anyway. It doesn't really matter at this point because James Harden ended up getting traded to the Philadelphia 76ers in a package that sent back Andre Drummond, who's most famous for this clip, Seth Curry, and of course Ben Simmons, and a couple of picks. Now, ultimately, at the time, the trade just made way too much freaking sense. I mean, James Harden is in his early 30s. You don't know how much longer he's going to be this productive for anymore. So the fact that you're able to sell high on his value and get a young budding star in Ben Simmons, or a player that could eventually turn into a star, or maybe just a man that needed a change of scenery because he was expected to do way too much on the Philadelphia 76ers, in my book was a huge W. But then the question came, and this especially was the question once we started seeing James Harden play in games, when are we going to see Ben Simmons play? Now, originally, Ben Simmons didn't play with the Philadelphia 76ers because of mental health concerns, and although some of us might look at that and aren't really necessarily able to understand what the man's going through, I can't necessarily say I blame him considering how all of Philadelphia was booing him after they lost to the Atlanta Hawks last year, and his own head coach threw him under the bus.
You think Ben Simmons can still be a point guard for a championship team like the one you guys want to become?
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now, so I don't know the answer to that.
And we just made another video on how Philadelphia 76ers players aren't necessarily the biggest fan of Doc Rivers. So for lack of a better way of saying it, you could say that they are kind of imploding behind the scenes.
He said it! He said it!
Now, since that video, they've won 2 games, but it is an interesting narrative how players don't necessarily get along with Doc Rivers, how Doc Rivers has a history of snaking his players. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look at what they did to Blake Griffin when they signed him to a gigantic contract extension, promising that he's going to retire as a Los Angeles Clipper before inevitably shipping him off to Detroit. But I digress, because this video should be about Ben Simmons, and Ben Simmons has yet to play a game so far for the Brooklyn Nets. If he is to play a game for the Brooklyn Nets, and if this team is healthy, they're one of the scariest teams in the Eastern Conference. Unfortunately,
It appears as though time has run out for them.
the play-in games are literally in a week from now, and the Brooklyn Nets are going to have to win 2 games in a row, which at the time we're making this video, it seems like they're going to have to face off against Charlotte Hornets and then face off against the Atlanta Hawks or the Cleveland Cavaliers. Which, if you ask me, I think that is very doable. I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, just them two, are going to be able to achieve that. Why am I only saying them two? What about Ben Simmons? Well, today, the Brooklyn Nets head coach, Steve Nash, officially announced that there is no way, shape, or form that Ben Simmons is going to be able to return this NBA season. So, according to ESPN, Brooklyn Nets head coach Steve Nash said that Ben Simmons won't make his season debut in the regular season. He's also likely out of play-in games. It opens up by saying that Brooklyn Nets swingman Ben Simmons will not be making his season debut in the regular season as he continues to deal with a herniated disc issue in his back. Nets coach Steve Nash said after Monday's practice that while he remains hopeful that Simmons will return at some point in the playoffs, he would be shocked if Simmons played in the Nets play-in game next week. He's not running, so yeah, Nash said. I don't see him being ready. I would be shocked. So this is without a doubt the worst case scenario for the Brooklyn Nets because you pretty much gave up a player that was able to play in James Harden and got Ben Simmons in return. What you were hoping for here, and of course you got Seth Curry and Andre Drummond, but what you were hoping for here is Ben Simmons is a much better complement to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. The fit was perfect because Ben Simmons wouldn't be expected to take over games. That's what you had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving for. What Ben Simmons would be expected to do, and what I thought was a stroke of genius for the Brooklyn Nets, is Ben Simmons could be tasked as being the defensive stopper, the Draymond Green, well, minus the trash talk I suppose, of the Brooklyn Nets. Stick him on to Giannis Antetokounmpo, and maybe he could slow him down a little bit. Stick him on to any opposing star player and have him only focus on that, grabbing rebounds and running transition. That sounds remarkable. And unfortunately, it seems like not only will the Brooklyn Nets have the opportunity to try to integrate Ben Simmons into the offense during the regular season, which I personally thought was crucial because the storyline of the Brooklyn Nets big three, whether it was with James Harden last year or Ben Simmons this year, is the fact that they didn't get many games together. The big three of James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant have played in 16 games in total with one another. In those 16 games, they won 13 of them. That's how little they've played with each other, and that's how successful they were. This is without a doubt one of the biggest what ifs in NBA history, and it appears as though, unfortunately, they're going through the same thing once again. Now, I'm not pointing the blame finger at Ben Simmons because the man has a herniated disc issue in his back. This could legitimately end his career. I don't think you guys understand how big of a deal a herniated disc is. Now, the article continues saying that after requesting a trade from the 76ers, citing mental health concerns, Simmons was finally dealt to the Nets just before the trade deadline in February, but has not been able to play because of ongoing issues with his back. Nash said that Simmons actually made progress Monday by being able to shoot and starting to do some work with resistance bands, but the organization still has no idea when or if Ben Simmons might be able to play this season. I mean, that's a big progression just to get here. So he was doing nothing on the floor, but obviously he clearly started strengthening and doing some light shooting, so super positive on one hand. On the other, it's not like we're expecting him in the lineup in the next week. Now, the positive news is that Steve Nash said that he wouldn't have a problem with Ben Simmons making his debut for the team in a playoff game, even though he hasn't played all year. But he made it clear that the top priority for the Brooklyn Nets would be being very cautious before putting him back on the floor. Nash had this to say: if he had played 65 games this year and we're going into the playoffs and he had a few weeks of injury, maybe you'd think about rushing the normal progression. But I think in this situation, we got to put his health and safety first and make sure that we're certain he's ready to play and contribute. And the other part is he hasn't played basketball, so you don't know what kind of Ben you're going to get. And he hasn't been in an NBA game for 9 to 10 months. Now, Ben Simmons' teammates and coaches have mentioned that he's in good spirits in his new surroundings, but they just don't know when he's going to be able to play. Now, Steve Nash was asked how realistic he thinks it'll be that Ben Simmons could come back and play in the first round if the Nets were able to get through the 2 play-in games. And Nash said, "We'll see. I don't want to get too far down the road. Like, I don't want to walk through the next 5 weeks with you guys and guessing. You guys saw where he is today. He's doing some increased strengthening, some increased mobility stuff, and a little bit of shooting, and that's it." So this is very unfortunate for the Brooklyn Nets because I'm assuming when you traded for Ben Simmons, when you make a move like trading James Harden for Ben Simmons, where you strengthen another Eastern Conference team because you pretty much gave the Philadelphia 76ers an all-star, whereas they would have just had a player that wasn't playing, and you took on a player that can't play in return. Now, without a doubt, I think in the long run, Ben Simmons is going to pay off a little bit more than James Harden. That's just my prediction. But this is unfortunate for the Brooklyn Nets if they want to contend now. Hopefully we get some better news in regards to the situation. If you're a Nets fan, let me know what you guys think about this situation. Do you regret the James Harden trade? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.